Welcome to the Acoustics Podcast. This is Brian Mitchell, your host and founder of acoustics.com. Today, we are joined once again by Jim Garrett, Senior Director of Product Strategy and Planning at Harman's Luxury Audio Group. Some of you may remember the last time we spoke, we covered JBL's new Classic series, which revives the look and feel of JBL's iconic 1970s loudspeakers and components, combining state-of-the-art hi-fi technology with retro styling. But today we'll be updating you on the latest products now shipping from JBL and get to the bottom of Harman's surprise acquisition of Roon. But first, we'll travel across the pond to discuss another brand in the Harman Luxury portfolio, which is Arcam, who has just announced the new Radia series of hi-fi components. Jim, we got a lot to cover. Let's get started. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation again.
Let's start us off with there's 5 products in this new Radia range. Let's just dive into them.
All right. Sounds good. So, well, we didn't discuss them last time because it was a big secret last time. And it was much bigger than just the 5 products. It's a brand refresh. So we've created a lot of new assets, slightly revamped the logo. There was a new website that went live when we did the product announcement. And we really wanted to treat it as the special event that it really was, a refresh of the brand. And the first 5 products that we did as part of the first Radia Series products that we've done, whole new industrial design, improved performance of the products. So there was a lot to share, which is why we did the dedicated launch event in London, share a little bit about the history of the brand, how that's parlayed itself into the new Radia Series, all the research that we put into those new products, of which there was a significant amount, and then a product overview. It was a great event. So we're excited that these things have come to life. You spent so much time developing them, right? And then it's like, oh, they're out in the public.
So Harman acquired Arcam in 2017. Is that
2016? You got my math right. So it was a year before Samsung acquired Harman. We acquired Arcam. So I believe it was 2016 and 2017, respectively.
Okay.
So.
And so there were some initial development, or is this the first big development of a product range under the new ownership?
No. So we did the previous series, the HDA series. That launch was shortly after we did the acquisition of the company. And then we did all the new AVRs was under, once they became part of Luxury Audio, that launch was part of that. So this is our probably 3rd or 4th launch for him, but certainly first, and it marks a major change in the industrial design of the products and a pretty heavy investment into the brand. So that it's pretty significant from that standpoint.
And for those listening on the podcast, this is a complete U-turn from the Classic series. This is modern design. I don't think there's anything out that looks quite like it right now. Very black, sleek. What went into the design?
Yeah. So yes, it's very much, you have Classic series on one end, as we say, that kind of follows the trend of nostalgia, which is, things that are retro in appearance or vintage in appearance, but they have, modern features and connectivity. So that certainly appeals to that crowd. And then with Radia, it's a very modern appearing product, very clean industrial design. The research that we put into the products in terms of who was going to be the customer to buy these, we knew, of course, that we had the aficionados, if you will say, of the typical Arcam customer that we've had for decades, and we're not going to move away from that customer. We want to kind of double down with those guys, but we do want to expand the brand, bring new customers into the fold, just appeal to anybody that loves music. But the design part of that was going to be a key piece of it. But the design wasn't just, hey, let's make something that look cool. It looks cool, because that is a big piece of it, but it's also how do you interact with the product. So we had this mantra of simplicity that applied to all of the products, which is why you see such clean front panels on the units, with just on the amplifiers, obviously just 2 encoders and not all those buttons and controls and things that can be intimidating to a lot of newcomers into the component audio space. So that was a big part of the design, as well as materials, color trends, that specific color of Radia yellow, as we called it, but bringing yellow in as that energetic color that we brought into the mix. All of these things kind of were part of the design of the product.
Sure. Well, I'd like to jump into some of the price points and realize that hopefully we don't scare people away. This is affordable hi-fi, from $6.99 to $14.99 for the most expensive component in the series, and this is designed to work with any loudspeakers. But I'm sure you'd like to match them up with JBL or Rivel or something in the luxury group.
Preferably, yes, but of course, yeah, they'll work well with a good quality loudspeaker of any brand. So for us, yes, it is a modest price point. When you look at the current products that we have in the previous series, the HDAs, so we've got 3 integrated amplifiers: SA10, SA20, SA30. Hopefully, a lot of the listeners, viewers will be familiar with those models. So this first phase, as we call it, phase 1 of the Radia series, was focused on replacing primarily the SA10 and SA20. So we've got 3 models now rather than 2. And part of that was to bring that price point in, the A5 specifically, bring in a lower price point than what we had before, again, in hopes that we can bring some new customers into the brand. So that was the focus there with those products. And then, of course, the A25, that also brings in our G-Class amplifier technology, but that's the big boy of the 3 integrated amps that we had in this first series. And then, of course, we had the 2 digital source players, the ST5 and the CD5, in our streamer and CD player, respectively. So,
Right. So you have 5 components. You can buy 1 and use it. You could buy 3. You don't need to buy more than 3 of the 5. They all
no,
work
not
together.
correct. Yeah. And obviously, integrated amps are super popular right now. Everybody likes them because of the simplicity. It kind of gives you what you need in one component. These price points kind of, you can't really put a streaming engine in a product at these price points when we're talking, like you said, $6.99 for an entry-level integrated amp. So there were some cool things that we did, though, thinking back to this type of customer and how they're going to use them. So all of the products have 2-way Bluetooth capability in the integrated amp. So you could technically stream to any of the 3 amplifiers by just pairing your phone or your tablet to it. But to your point, you're not going to need to buy more than 3 components if you wanted to have absolutely everything, right? Because the CD player
Right.
just plays CDs, the streamer just
Right.
streams, and the amp is just an amp. So put
Right.
the 3 together and there you go.
So you have 3 integrated amps: A5, A15, A25, from $6.99, $9.99, and $14.99. And I know customers might be looking at that. They all look similar on the outside, but inside there's a few differences. What kind of customer would you direct to the A5? Let's start with that one and work our way towards the the A25.
Sure. Yeah. So the A5 is where everything begins. The cool thing about these, all 3 amplifiers share pretty much the same feature set. So when you're moving up, there's just the key differences in amplification. There are some features and things that you gain when you get to the A25. So starting with the A5, it's a very high quality amplifier in that respect. So it's a Class AB amp, 50 watts per channel. You've got great analog and digital input capability on it. It's got a nice DAC built into it. You've got a front panel headphone connection on it. So it'll cover pretty much everything you need. As I mentioned, they have 2-way Bluetooth as well. So for somebody that's looking to get into a great sounding amplifier, a price that doesn't break the bank, the A5 is a great place to start. And it'll work well with, at 50 watts a channel. It could do some floor standing loudspeakers, but a lot of people that are in smaller spaces or more compact system with a nice pair of bookshelf monitors or something like that, a great way to put a system package together for that. We did at the launch event, we actually paired it with our JBL HDI bookshelf speakers there, and sounds a great combination right there with those 2 products together. So
So what would be
that's
the combo with that price point together, the A5 and the bookshelf?
So that particular bookshelf speaker is a little more expensive. Those are $1,800 a pair US versus the $699. But if you were to, again, I'll use our brand as a
Sure.
reference point there. You could do a Revel M16, which is a great sounding bookshelf speaker. They're just under $1,000 a pair. If you get into the JBL range, the new Studio 6 bookshelf speakers, you can get one with the compression driver in it there. I think those are $599 US. around in that price range. So there's a variety of price points of speakers that would work well with that. But just assuming again, what kind of money are people likely to spend on a loudspeaker? If they spent $700 on an integrated amp, well, they're probably not going to spend $3,000 to $4,000 on the
Right.
loudspeaker. So something in that range, I would expect is where you'd want to pair them with.
And as you move up the line, A15 gives you 80 watts times two instead of 50 watts, but
Yeah.
otherwise very similar. Same, same DAC, same
Yep.
Bluetooth, same everything, just more power.
Yeah, and not only is it more power, but it is a better amplifier. So there's a little couple of tweaks and improvements to the circuit design in that. So not only are you getting more power, but it's a little better sounding amplifier. It's still a Class AB amp. There are linear power supplies on all these products, so you're just stepping up to a little bit better sound, those as well as the additional power. So for somebody that's looking for something that could drive maybe a bigger floor standing loudspeaker in your space, A15 would be a great choice to go with. Other than that, all of the other features are identical. Same number of ins and outs, digital analog, same Bluetooth, same DAC, everything in there.
And then let's step up to the flagship, the A25. And this is where things change up a bit. We go up to 100 watts and Class G amplifier technology, which I'll let you fill everyone in on that.
So yeah, so the key changes when you step from the 15 to the 25. You'll notice the chassis actually gets a little bit smaller again. The 5 and the 25 are the same size chassis, just because the G class is a little more efficient in terms of how we're able to package it with heat sink and things like that. So we can put it in a slightly smaller chassis like the A5, whereas the 15 is a little bit bigger. So yes, you're going to get more power again, as you said, 80 to 100 watts, but it's G instead of AB. We'll talk about that more in a minute. The other primary features that are different is we step up to a better DAC in the A25, so it's a higher performance DAC in that, and you also gain the USB-C input on the DAC, which is not found on the other two products. And then you'll see on the front of the unit as well that there's a nicer front panel display, higher quality, like a OLED type display that's on the front of the unit. So bigger fonts and some other things that are a little more premium feeling on that particular piece. So G class again is going to be one of your biggest differences there. And now you're going to get into an amplifier that's a really, really good sounding amplifier. It's a more expensive approach to designing an amplifier, which is why this is where you start at the $14.99 price point. We were just talking yesterday with a few people, and if we want to talk about the difference between how expensive a G-Class amp is to implement versus an AB, you can look at our AVR range. And when you go from an AVR 21 to an AVR 31, the primary difference between those two products is a G-Class amp versus the AB. And it's about a $2,000 price point between those two AVRs, going from around $4,000 to around $6,000. And that's with 7 channels of G-Class. So a big toroidal power supply. The G-Class implementation really allows the amp to work more like a Class A amplifier in most listening situations. You know, when people think about, well, how much power do I need? Most of the time you're listening, you're using 1 or 2 watts of power at
Right.
you know, traditional levels. So in that respect, the G-Class is going to operate like a Class A amp. So ultra low distortion, super clean sound. But with G-Class, you actually have 2 sets of rails. So the second set of rails can kick in when you need the peak current demands, high dynamic capability. And so those switch in at a very fast rate that you can switch on or switch in, because they're always running that second set of rails. So you get these huge dynamic power reserves that you can get out of it. So while we rate that amp 100 watts per channel, into like a 4-ohm load dynamically, it can do 250, 260 something watts of power when it's at, you know, full max, what can I do sort of thing. Right. So now that means we could drive a much larger loudspeaker with it. But again, you're just going to get a much higher sound quality with that unit, just much lower distortion, and kind of, again, more that Class A type of amplifier sound. Still an analog amp technology, very much an analog amp technology. And again, big toroid donut power supply in there when you pop the lid on it. But that's going to be the real key difference, stepping from the 15 to the 25.
All right, I'm going to harp on Class G a little bit more, because I don't think a lot of people know about it. It's not used by, I don't know of any competitors that use Class G. And I think Arcam was an early innovator in developing or in implementing Class G. So maybe you could give us a little history and why are you only using it, and a little bit more of some of the sound characteristics that you may experience.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's a proprietary amp technology, but as you mentioned, there's really nobody else using it, at least in the mainstream market. But and it's not something we necessarily invented, but it is something that our team has been working on refining generation after generation of it. This is not our first G class; we've had many, many before this. So from that standpoint, Arcam's been a music first company, right? Everything that we do is about music, making it sound as good as it possibly can. And the company has a great reputation for making very affordable products that sound like much more expensive products. And that's always been something that there have been a lot of fans for the brand because of that. So G Class kind of dovetails in nicely to that. And I think, again, when we just kind of look at the implementation of it, it's a more difficult design to do, but there were just so many sonic benefits to it, is why we wanted to implement it. We've got John Dawson, who's one of the co-founders of Arcam. It still works for us. He's, been around with the company since 1976 when it was founded, but still comes in to work with us. And he's been the one that's been helping to really drive this amp technology, been a big proponent of it. Peter Cool and some of the Paul Neville and our hardware team that we have, Dave Barber, the guys that are in our Cambridge office have really been working on just pushing the envelope even further. Like when we're working on these amp designs of not only the specific transistors and all the devices that are used in the circuits and the power supplies, but what are the materials of the chassis and how does that affect the sound quality using, steel here or aluminum there or whatever types of changes we could do. So that's been a big part of what we've done to try to push the performance of these amplifiers, and specifically the G Class just kind of gives us a little bit of a leg up in that respect. So I think they sound fantastic personally, and again, I think you get the benefits of they can drive just about any loudspeaker because we get some pretty high current capability, but that ultra low distortion just gives them such a rich premium sound. That it's a cool technology for sure.
Is there any sonic characteristics, warm sounding, neutral sounding, that are maybe distinct with Class G? That, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know necessarily. I would say there's something inherently about the design. Maybe, if you think about Class A amps, people would equate them more, that warm type of sound. I think when you're comparing, a solid state amp to a tube amp, maybe most people would say, hey, Class A is probably the closest to that in terms of its sound. But that low distortion gives them a very clean and pristine sound. We, as a company, of course, have a philosophy of being pretty neutral towards sound when it comes to an amplifier, because for us, it's an amplifier is supposed to take an incoming signal and make it bigger. It's not supposed to take an incoming signal, change its sound and make it bigger. So from that standpoint, I think we tend to focus a little more neutral, but I would qualify it as that more of a warm sound. To me, it's not a, sometimes when people say, oh, we're neutral and we're super clean, super low distortion, well, then it gets clinical, right? And then you're like, oh, yes, it's technically accurate, but it doesn't sound good. For us, it's still very key that they be very musical products, and that they're a joy to listen to. So that I would say is where I would maybe classify it as a little more warm, if that's what people kind of equate that sound with, right? Not harsh or abrasive or cold or anything like that, but
right. Well, I think that some of the customers may second guess themselves. They might buy the A5 or the A15, and then they might wonder, oh, should I upgrade to the A25? And what do you think they'll experience if they choose to do that path and upgrade?
I think you'll see that again. they're all great sounding amplifiers, so you can't go wrong no matter where you're starting in there. It's going to come down to maybe what you're going to want to pair for your loudspeaker. How big of a room are you going to be in? What types of music do you like to listen to? Is that more power going to be beneficial? Maybe it would be in that case, right? If you're, I like big speakers, I like rock music, or I listen to EDM and I need that thump, right? So whatever those kinds of things might be, that might sway you one way or another. But again, not only is the amp going to be a higher quality and a better sounding amp, but you're also getting a better DAC. So if you're doing some digital inputs into the unit, that step to the A25 is going to give you higher performance on the digital side, not just the amplifier side of it. The analog circuitry be pretty similar between them. I don't think you're going to see a revolutionary change as you move between them, because they follow the same core circuit design among those three amplifiers there. But and you've got a nice little phono preamp in all of these as well too. We didn't mention that or not, but there's a moving magnet phono capability built into those as well for the vinyl lovers out there.
Right, but there's no turntable from Arcam right now, but you do have the JBL
Correct.
line, which has turntables, and they can connect to these no problem.
Yeah, correct. And in the Arcam range, it's the digital source players that we stuck to. We don't have a turntable under the Arcam brand at the moment. So, yeah, we've got the ST5 streamer, and then we've got the CD5 CD player. So that's, I was going to say one of the interesting things about, we talk about vinyl and we talk about CDs, is both of those as physical media formats. We've seen resurgences in both of them, which is kind of interesting. One of the first things that people were saying is like a CD player. We're like, yeah, because there's still tons of CDs out there. And there was a little, as the growth of turntables has been, pretty consistent. Right. It was like, oh, no, that's a one-off, and that was what, 5, 6, 8 years ago when it first happened. Well, then it's been year after year after year, and it hasn't gone away. So I guess it's a trend, right? But CDs, a little bit of the same thing, and some of that you can maybe attribute to vinyl. I think we're seeing younger generations that like the physical formats coming back in, and then also if it's like we compare the cost of what you can buy some nice CDs for these days versus what the price of an album, it's a little more affordable. So
let's talk about that CD5 CD player at $699. That's going to be your simplest setup to hook up to any of the integrated amps and play music.
Correct.
Just pop in a CD. But I did want to touch on one other thing. You mentioned there's a DAC difference between the A25, and I think all the other components use a different level DAC.
Yeah, the A25 is a step-up DAC. The other 4 products are the same DAC. So they're all based on an ESS chipset, but of course, how we implement that chipset changes. But it's a better chip that's used in the A25 than what's used in the rest of them. So in that case, if you want to use like the CD player, connect the A25, use the A25 stack in it if you wanted to do it that way.
And for the customer, how would they know which DAC they're using? Is it automatically going to switch over to the A25's higher end DAC?
So you'd want to use the digital output capability if you're going to do that out of these products. So using the analog output means I'm using whatever DAC is in that particular product. So if I put it through the digital connection out of the CD player or the streamer into the integrated amp, now I'm just sending that signal straight digital out of that box into the amplifier, and then it's the unit that will do the conversion to the analog signal, which is what you got to get to by the time you get to the amplifier.
Okay. That makes sense. And then you also have the ST5 streamer, which is dedicated streaming, although all the integrated amps have Bluetooth, so you can stream Bluetooth from your phone and get that. You can get that music set up. But if you want to upgrade to more music services and higher level connection, because Bluetooth doesn't give you a true lossless connection to your music. So that's where I think you want to go to the ST5. What did I miss there?
No, you're on the right path there. So obviously, if you're a digital consumer, you've got a lot of streaming services that you want to use. You can still do it with Bluetooth, and it's a quick and easy way to pair. It's another thing where I think Bluetooth gets kind of a bad rap, and a lot of the audio, reviewers and dealers and all the audio files, but it's still such a convenient connection, and people love to use it. It's simple, it's easy, it works, it's reliable. And it has considered over the generations that have come in, it's gotten considerably better sounding to the point where now, if you're an Android user, those of us that are iOS, we don't maybe get to enjoy the same level of performance with Bluetooth, but for Android users and like things like Qualcomm's adaptX or aptX adaptive algorithms that do much higher resolution Bluetooth, that's there. But that's still not going to be the replacement for doing a hardwired network connection into a device that can do full res into the DAC if 24/192 capabilities in it. And that's where using a dedicated streaming device like the ST5 can do that for you. That's a Roon ready endpoint. And so if you're doing network streaming, you can pull in at max res, but it's also got Chromecast and AirPlay compatibility. So if you're working off one of those ecosystems, you can do that. Of course, those themselves are limited 48K and 96K, but you can still get some pretty high res sound quality with it. I'm one of those, I'm sure there will be opinions out there, but to me, CD quality is high res. So once you're at or above that, which pretty much all of those are going to be, I think you're in a world now of high res sound. So you get the capability to do all of those things there. So again, with an ST5, if I'm using any of the core streaming services, so of course we've Tidal Connect and Spotify Connect are now where you use the native app direct to the product, and you can get max resolution in there. But with this product, we've got a dedicated app, an Arcam app, a Radia app for it that will allow you to do Qobuz and Amazon Music as well. So now I can get higher resolution streaming through the ST5 than you would by just pairing your phone or your tablet to it, to the amp via Bluetooth.
Right. So for the person that wants the top of the line Arcam setup right now, get them the A25 with the ST5, and if they listen to CDs, add on the CD5 CD player, and you're about a little under 3,000 total, about 2,800 for that setup. Of course, you have to add speakers, but that gives you the Arcam experience. And I think a lot of people that don't know Arcam and don't know why they should consider the brand, because there's a lot of competition now amongst, especially a lot of British brands, and Arcam is one of those British brands. So, can you talk about maybe some of the heritage and other reasons why a consumer should consider Arcam?
So our engineering facility for all of our luxury audio electronics, with the exception of Mark Levinson, we do that out of our facility in Cambridge, England, which was originally the Arcam facility, but we've obviously got a whole team of people over there, and we do JBL synthesis, JBL, Arcam, all those electronics are done with the team over there. But again, if you go back to John Dawson, the co-founder of the company, you think about how many audio companies that are based around that part of England, and specifically in Cambridge, England there. Some companies that may even have Cambridge in their name. so when you look at some of those brands and you just think about it, right? Arcam, Cambridge Audio, and Lin, and Meridian, and all these brands that have come out of that UK hi-fi market, most of those were all guys that hung out together in their college days, so it's fascinating. I've been privileged to work with some pretty legendary engineers and company founders throughout my career in audio. And John's yet another one, and we just hang out with him, have a beer, and start talking about audio history. And it's just like they were just buds all doing stuff and creating audio. They love music. And it's really fascinating to see how much hi-fi heritage has come from like this one little pocket of England over there. So the cool thing about that is it's a rich heritage. But I think in our case with Arcam, it's been at the forefront of a lot of that. Not that any of those are bad brands by any means, but Arcam's been a big piece of this. Matter of fact, what Hi-Fi at their annual awards just a month or so ago, John got a Lifetime Achievement Award for his contributions to the hi-fi world. There's so many things that they have done with the brand previously in terms of some firsts, whether it was firsts for European audio brands or just some firsts in general. And a lot of that came from the original analog amplifier parts of the brand. They were early into digital sound, early into compact disc. I think the first CD players that were ever built in the UK were Arcam players, first DAB tuners and things like that. So they were always really at the forefront of sound, which is one of the things, of course, that was of interest to us and the acquisition back in the day. So I think you're going to get a very high quality product when you choose Arcam in that respect. And again, that music first philosophy has been there since day one. All of us in the brand we're music freaks, right? If the thousands of CDs and musical instruments and things behind me don't indicate that, but that's pervasive throughout the team. So that passion that we all have for music comes into the products. We want to share that passion with music lovers all over the world, and so we put that's part of the DNA of the products. We put it into the products so that people can have that same love of music. So that's my quick sales pitch on why you would want Arcam, because we're awesome. We're music lovers.
Yeah, I have one more thing that I just learned about Arcam that I didn't know. Tell me about how the name came to be.
Yeah, Arcam. So a lot of people don't know what it is, but it was originally Amplification and Recording Cambridge. So John was actually a member of a group on campus there that was the Amplification and Recording Club. And they were all just guys that were audio geeks and wanted to record, the shows being played at the clubs and things like that. And so they were the audio club, I guess, at the time. And so that's kind of how it started. And when they made the first product, the A60 amplifier we had was the first product of the brand that John and Chris Evans, his co-founder, created. And it was something that they, as he likes to say, we made it for beer money. We thought we could sell a few to our friends. But then quickly some of the hi-fi magazines got a hold of it and found out, well, this is an amazing sounding product. And then they went on to sell, I think we sold somewhere, 30 to 35,000 those pieces from the time of its first inception. So then that became a brand. So then as they went on, it got kind of shortened to A&R Cambridge. And then, of course, with Cambridge being in the name and not being the only hi-fi brand with Cambridge in the name, then they decided to take the acronym of Arcam, which was just simply the A from amplification, the R from recording, and the CAM out of Cambridge. So that's where Arcam itself came from. So that's one of the things, as we say, amplification is in our name, why we feel we make a pretty dang good amplifier. So
no, that's a great story. I don't know why I didn't know that. I feel like it should have been more common knowledge, and kind of once you do know it, you can't undo it. It's like,
well, yeah.
It just fits.
Yep.
So let's transition now to some of the new JBL stuff that you had a lot of announcements there. I don't know how you keep track of all the products coming out, because you cover JBL and Revel and Mark Levinson. So you got
JBL Synthesis, whichever JBL flag. I was like, I realized I'm wearing a JBL Synthesis shirt. We're talking about Arcam at the moment. So, but to that point, yes, we have 5 brands of products that we manage, but there were a lot of things that we introduced for the JBL brand specifically over the year. And a lot of these things that are coming into production just right now as we've entered the holiday season and finishing up the 2023 calendar year. So a lot of cool products there from the JBL Classic series. Our first Bluetooth turntable that's come to market now and has been super popular right out of the gate. So a lot of cool stuff there. The Classic series is probably the thing got the most news this year, just because we introduced so many new products, really expanded that Classic series. And that all comes off the success we had with the L100 loudspeaker when we brought that back a few years ago. And that, as we mentioned earlier, kind of dovetails back into that whole retro enthusiasm that's out there in the market right now for anything that looks like that. So one of the things that we did, the announcements we had back when we talked for CES, we were talking about at that time, we were introducing a whole new range of electronics for the Classic series. Some of that came out of the fact that once we did the L100, we obviously saw a huge thirst in the market for that type of product. And there's so much heritage behind that particular model. Then as we scaled it to the smaller variants with the L82, the L52, And then some people are like, well, can we have a cool vintage sub that goes with it? We did the L10CS, and then we did our all-in-one music system, the L75. But the electronics kind of came out of that SA750 we did as a 75th anniversary limited product, which was inspired for me just by the products we used to have in the 1960s. And I was like, these things look so cool. Let's make something that looks like that, but has the modern features, connectivity, and performance in it. Well, then, people are like, well, that's cool, but it's $3,300 and it's way too much money to go with the rest of the speakers. So that's why we created the SA550. And then we did the digital source players there. We have a CD player and a streamer in that range, and then as well as a turntable. So we fleshed all of that out. And we also went back and said, well, some of the limited editions we did of the loudspeakers, like the Black Edition version and the 75th anniversary of the L100, we knew we could just make the regular L100 better. So we did a Mark II version of that. We announced that at the Munich show back in May. And the L82, the smaller version, which was only a year or two younger than the L100, we did a Mark II version of that as well. So those got the performance improvements that we created for the limited edition products like the Black Edition. So you got better drivers and a better crossover network and the by-wire input capabilities in them. So we just took all that, the better acoustic package that was in the limited edition ones, and put it back in the standard appearance of the original L182. There's a Mark II. That's how you get a Mark II version of that.
Okay, so the Mark II is really the original limited edition, but in new colors, or is there some more?
No, so the colors are still the same. So when you think of our L100, it's kind of as the Henry Ford approach of any color you want as long as it's black on your Ford Model T, right? So in this case, all of the Classic Series speakers are in the walnut wood veneer because that's what they were in the day, and then they got a black front baffle and a black back baffle. So the Mark II is that same cabinet. So when you look at a Mark II and we'll call it a Mark I, but the original L100 Classic, if they're looking at them from the front, they look identical. So when you pull the grill off, you'll see, of course, the label around the attenuator control says Mark II on it. You can't really see the refinements in the drivers because they're in the motor structure and the soft bits and things like that. If you spin them around to the back, you can tell because it's a by-wire input cup and premium metal binding posts and things like that. So from an exterior standpoint, they look pretty much identical. And while they're all walnut cabinets, you do have the choice of a black grill, a blue grill, or an orange grill. And that's where the colors come into play from that standpoint. So that Quadrex foam grill is where the color choices come into play. This cabinet body, the only other way to get a different version of that was one of the limited edition versions, like the Black Edition, which was our piano gloss black with special gold badging, or the 75th anniversary L100 we did, which had a really premium teak wood veneer on all 6 sides of the cabinet. So that's where the different cabinets have come in. So if you're an L100 lover and you're collecting all the different variants, you've got originals, of course, you could collect. You've got our L100 Classic that we reissued about 5 years ago, and now a Mark II version of that. You have the 75th anniversary version of it. We have a Black Edition version of it. And then if you're a Supreme fan, there was even a limited edition Supreme version that they dropped a year ago, 2 years ago. So there's a lot of really cool L100 variants out there now for the completist that wants to have them all. So
right. So what's still what is shipping right now? Then it sounds like those may have sold out. Some of those early.
A lot of those have sold out. This guy's brand new. So when I talked about the L75 as our all-in-one classic music system, this is the new little baby brother. This is the L42, which is a smaller version of it. It pretty much has all the same features. It's about 30% smaller. It's about 30% less retail price point. This is a $1,000, $999 price point versus $1,499 for the bigger version of it. This doesn't have the phono input that the L75 has. That's got a moving magnet phono stage in it. This does not, but this has everything else. So the cool thing about this, again, it's an all-in-one music system, which is what I use it for back here. Wireless networking capability, Chromecast AirPlay, Bluetooth. It's a Roon endpoint. It's got an HDMI ARC input on it. It's got analog and digital physical connections on it. So it really can do everything you want. So for somebody that, this sits conveniently here on a bookcase or a sideboard or something in there, but you can play all your music through it. I could really use it as a replacement and a step up performance from a soundbar. So if I wanted to connect this to my TV, now it's great for watching movies, doing gaming. We've got a subwoofer output on it. So that same subwoofer we introduced earlier this year, the L10CS, will match with this guy. So you could do a 2.1 system with it. It's a really cool product from that standpoint.
So for those that are listening on the audio version of this, this looks like a taller version of a small soundbar, but it's an all-in-one speaker with the amplification built in, and you just kind of plug it into the wall and play your music.
Yes. Yeah.
But you did surprise me with one thing, because I didn't think it was meant to be used as a soundbar. I thought it wasn't, but can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's one of the things that we've seen again. So we think about just people that want to have great sound in it, but there's a lot of different factors that come into play of, how big of a space, what kind of space do I live in? Where can I put it? How do I want to use the product? And if you live in an apartment or a smaller space, you're not going to have multiple audio systems that people in larger homes may have, where, there's a system in a bedroom and a system in a family or whatever. It's like they come home, that's my system. And we've always known that a lot of people are using sound bars to play music on. Sound bars they can be, good sounding devices. A lot of people are buying sound bars because the sound of the TV is so poor that they need a better experience. But then when people started like, well, hey, I don't have a space for a music system, why couldn't I use my sound bar for it? So now sound bars have streaming and Bluetooth connectivity. People use them, but what if I want better sound than that? But I still want that same ease of connectivity and that same small form factor. We wanted to create something that would be a step up in performance, a pretty serious one in performance. It's this is a great way to go from that standpoint. And yes, it's fundamentally a two-channel stereo product from that standpoint, but we included a sound field expander in the product that gives it a super broad soundstage, and in a traditional listing room can give you a pretty compelling illusion of surround. It sounds like sound is coming much higher than the unit, much more to the sides, almost not quite completely around to the back of you, but it's a pretty convincing, huge soundstage that you get out of that, which makes it great for a step up from a sound bar. L75 is available in two versions. I mentioned Black Edition products to someone earlier, so you can get an L75 in the Black Edition, which is another $150, basically $1,650 retail price point for that. And that just changes from the traditional classic style appearance of the, if you want to call it old school, the walnut wood veneer with the black grill. It goes to the high gloss piano black painted finish, which really transitions it from something vintage looking to something pretty contemporary looking. Obviously the appearance is, we designed these products to appeal to different customers, because you're going to have somebody that's into the retro look, the vintage look, or you're going to have somebody that's a more modern, clean, contemporary type of customer. Because while yes, they're audio components, we're going to shop with our eyeballs first and foremost of what looks cool and what fits my decor and my style and my personality at home. But again, as the parent company with us here at Harman, we're pretty much a very science-based, research-based, targeted sound quality company. So all of that stuff fits in there. But the DNA of each of those respective brands is still coming into play. The Arcam looks and feels like an Arcam product. The JBL looks and feels like a JBL product. So you've got the differences between the two there. Now we'll still see the mix and match, because even we did it at the Arcam launch event. As I mentioned, the Black Edition version of the classic loudspeakers, when you look at that version, it just looks so clean and contemporary and modern. Those fit very well with the Arcam Radia series. So we used the Black Edition of the L100 with the A25, because they had this ultra modern looking black components with an elegant black loudspeaker. But I wouldn't I can't imagine that somebody that was shopping for an 825 would be this, you're shopping for a speaker that looked like an L100. He's
Right.
probably shopping for a more contemporary, floor standing loudspeaker of some other design. So, and that could be where our Rebel brand perhaps could come into play. But that to me, I would just think that somebody shopping in that Arcam range is likely looking at a more European type of loudspeaker, rather than that classic old vintage American type of loudspeaker. So in the
Right.
same way with the electronics, the other way around, right? And I think somebody's looking for vintage electronics to go with some modern looking loudspeaker. So
Right. Well, the final thing I want to talk about is the surprise announcement on Cyber Monday, which everyone got, that Harman had acquired Roon Labs, to be more specific, and it's a music management service. But can you talk about what Roon is, what it does, and what it may do going forward?
yeah, so hopefully a significant number of the viewers and listeners out there are familiar with Roon. You and I and everybody in the audio industry is, because it's just such a cool tool that we all use it. And if you've ever been to an audio trade show or any of the local dealers, they're all using it right now to do the demonstrations. We've been using it for years and years. So what it comes from is really, at its most simplest, would be content aggregation. So it's a great user interface to take all of these various places where you're getting your music content from and bringing it through a common portal. So it's an easy thing to use. We were talking just yesterday, somebody was asking me, it's like, it's the end of the year, right? What's your top artist from your streaming system? And it's like, I use 5 different streaming services, and I listen to physical media, and there's so many different places that you do it from. I'm the type of person like that is where Roon comes into play, because I can take and have, through just the Roon app, through the Roon interface, wherever my music comes from, any of the streaming services. If I wanted to listen to, name an artist, it'll show me everything that I can have access to from that artist from any of those sources. Anything that I may have ripped to my computer, or anything from my streaming services, anything that's living on the network in my house on another machine. So that's a cool thing. And then it can also be the playback conduit to anything that is a Roon capable product in your home. So if you've got, for example, this speaker, and I know those that are listening can't see it, but those that are watching can see that. That's the L42 JBL again. That's a Roon ready product. So because it's an active loudspeaker, I can have that on my network at home, and now Roon can see it. So we can, through the Roon app on my phone, my tablet, my PC, whatever, my Mac computer, I can send a stream of music directly to that product. So that's one of the cool things about it. And you can do multiple streams throughout your house. But it's also, for music lovers, is a great way to learn more about music and discover new artists. And that's one of the things that, for me, Roon can quickly become, rather than a passive listening experience, an active listening experience. Because if you're a music geek like I am, and you want to know everything about the artist, where was this album recorded? It's like liner notes, right? It's a digital equivalent of liner notes these days. Who played on this? Where was it recorded? What are the lyrics? But from a discovery standpoint, what's really cool is, I like this artist, I like this album. What else is out there that I might like, that is similar to this thing that I do like? So that gives you the ability then to really explore and discover a whole bunch of new artists and music you may not have been exposed to before. So in a nutshell, again, content aggregation, music discovery, and a way to really just bring all your access to all these digital services together into one common, easy to use, very easy to use UI. One of the bummers of it all now, when you just think about how many different places you can go get music, they don't all play nicely together right now. It's the same sort of thing, right? When we all got access to streaming video content, you're like, I don't need cable anymore. But now we've all quickly come up to go, I subscribe to 10 different streaming services, because and they don't all talk and work together. So that's I think, in the audio equivalent of this, Roon is probably the best the closest thing we have yet to having access to just about, not everything, but just about everything you can get through it. So
right. So Roon is cool. It's not a music service itself. It's the
no,
management of the music service,
yes.
but it does come with a fee, and it's $15 a month, or at least that's what it has been. And I know everyone's wondering, um, is it going to be free? Um,
We wonder that too. The yeah. So right now, obviously, this acquisition is very, very recent. The way it's been set up, first of all, we're super excited. We're an audio company, right? And so, and the guys at Roon are just music fanatics, and they really wanted to just bring a better experience, a better listening experience to market. So the beauty of it is they now have access to a significantly larger amount of resources than they ever had as a smaller company. So that's a good thing. And for us as an audio company, we want to make it as best it can be as well. So, but the first thing I know that everybody's concern was right out of the gate, well, I had the lifetime subscription. Is that going away? Or there's no changes to anything right now. Roon is what Roon was in terms of how it operates and the way the subscriptions work. And if you had that before, it's not going away or anything like that. So their team is now with us. They have all come on board. And so what we, again, really want to do is push it. It's going to operate as its own standalone business within us. So if, for those that saw the press release about it, it's reporting up to the president of the lifestyle division right now, so that it keeps autonomy in that respect. The other thing that we, of course, have to consider is there are roughly 160 manufacturers of audio products that are involved in Roon. And so we don't want any of that to change as well too. We want more manufacturers to be involved in it. So it's important for us that it keeps its independence in that respect, that it can continue to operate and that it doesn't, get absorbed and become a JBL thing or something like that. We want it to be
right.
Roon and make it even better than what it is now.
All that cross compatibility is what made it powerful. And there's, I'm assuming it's safe to say every Harman Luxury product is going to be Roon. And this is the other crazy thing. There's Roon Ready and Roon Tested. And I don't think anyone accurately knows the difference.
Well,
words.
I know.
Can we simplify those words and figure out what the next version of works with Roon is kind of all anyone really wants to know?
I agree with you. It's something that's already come up in the conversations we had. Well, which one's better? Is Tested better than Ready? Because people aren't really sure, right? But a Roon Ready device, of course, it means that, it's got the capability to do it. So anything that's in terms of a loudspeaker, it's got to be an active loudspeaker. But then any electronics that have network streaming capability in order for it to work, obviously, on Roon, because Roon lives on your network. So those types of things, I'm sure we make that stuff better. Can they make it better? I hope so. So there may be some clarifications to clean that up and expose more people to it. But Roon is one of those things that, they don't do a lot of marketing to it. So we all know about it because we're in the audio industry and you see it everywhere. It's pervasive throughout manufacturers and dealers and the media. But for a lot of consumers, they don't really know what it is. And it is an experiential thing that once you get your hands on it and can check it out and you're like, well, that's pretty cool. How come I didn't know about that? So that's the thing where I think we got to get the word out there and let people know that it's there, that it exists, and that it's a better way to listen. So that'll be one of the biggest things, and hopefully be one of the first things that happens with it too. So
as we look out into 2024, we've covered Arcam, JBL. What else do you want to talk about that consumers should be looking for this coming year?
I think there's a lot of cool stuff there. Turntables, we didn't get too much into those. We got a couple of really cool turntables right now that are coming out. And so as we're moving into 2024, a lot of these products that we just launched are starting to pick up speed. Our Bluetooth turntable that just went into production has quickly become one of our best-selling products. Part of that is the holiday gift giving season. A Bluetooth turntable is just a really cool way for people to get into the world of vinyl.
I don't know how you keep track of all the products and the brands and the model numbers, because everything is A25 and
Yeah.
HD this and so you got a great memory to be able to remember like every manufacturer model number, serial number,
Yeah.
UPC number, and all the rest. So you do an amazing job at the Harman Luxury Audio Group. I want to thank you again for being a guest on the podcast and would love to have you back as you announce more new products.